Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we got some impressions for you on the game behind me, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I've been on complete media blackout outside of 2 trailers for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth because after Remake, I was sold on the vision. It did not go how I expected, but I was sold on the vision. I thought it was bold, I thought it was brave, and I could not wait to see what happened next. But curiosity got the best of me. You know, the game got revealed. Okay, let's check out the trailer. And I checked out one more and said, you know what? I don't need to see any more. And I went in as blind could be. Square Enix hooked your boy up with a review code on February 9th. So got this game almost a month early. Embargo's lifting today. I didn't want to rush the experience, so I got almost 40 hours in the game, and I have a lot to say about those 40 hours. But keep in mind, these are impressions of someone who has not finished the title. Like I said, the story does go off the rails a bit with Remake and Rebirth. There was that mixture of anxiety and excitement of, okay, this is bold and brave. What are we doing here? I can't wait to see what happens. And are you going to break my heart, Square? So I'm here to tell you that throughout these 40 hours, I have thoroughly enjoyed myself. I have one complaint. I went through my entire set of review notes. One complaint. Pretty impressive effort thus far from Square Enix. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, absolutely so far, is one of my favorite games of the year. And I'm here to tell you exactly why. So ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, just a couple of little need to knows here about this particular review style video, which is that whenever you review a game, for those who don't know, you get embargo details. Here are the things you can share about the story. Here are the things you can't. We were told you cannot share anything visually beyond the first 2 chapters. There is so much to this game that is being hidden away. It is going to blow your socks off. Seriously, like, there is so much I wish I could talk about and show to you beyond the story that happens later in the game that I cannot. So if my description and breakdown of the story feels a bit light compared to my previous reviews you've watched, that's why, because we can only show things and talk about things really from the first 2 chapters of the game. And if there's one compliment I can give this game, it's that it never ever stays put. There's always a new gimmick, idea, something being introduced that keeps the general formula really exciting, really interesting, and the story just, it's doing its thing, man. It is so good, but we'll talk about all of that, but just a little bit of a heads up there. Now, Final Fantasy VII Remake, we're not going to spoil it here because you may be watching this review and you're someone who's interested in playing Remake and then getting into Rebirth, so we're not going to spoil it here, but what I will say is that with that game, it wasn't the traditional remake many of us were expecting. Oh, it's broken up into 3 parts. That's weird. Oh, and the first game's dedicated to Midgard, that section of the game that's only 2 to 3 hours in the classic Final Fantasy VII. Okay, as you get through it, you notice more and more, tons of deviations, tons of ways they explore the game in new ways and big changes. And so once it all ends, you're like, okay, this is not at all what I think we anticipated when we asked for a Final Fantasy VII Remake, but Square is doing something big and different here. And what you're going to find here in the early goings of Rebirth is a lot less of that. Like I said, early goings, main story stuff, not a ton of deviations, but they do it gradually over time. And when they do, oh boy, can I find the vocabulary to describe it? No, I cannot. But Rebirth's opening hour I can describe. It is so gas, so full of fan service. Crisis Core fans, feast your eyes. You open the game with Nibelheim. You get to play as Sephiroth. Yo, this is a dream come true. Some people may get bored at the whole kind of recappy focus of it. For me, as someone who adores Crisis Core, I love the opening of this game, especially the way they cap it off with a Cloud and Sephiroth team up. Oh my God. Beautiful stuff here. So yeah, I think the game opens incredibly strong, and beyond that, it's a game that's going to be toying with your expectations story-wise, right? What Remake did so well that Rebirth continues on is they know you are very much an expert of Final Fantasy VII. You know all the beats. You know how it all goes. But do you really? And Rebirth just continues to mess with you, continues to toy with the idea that things are not all as they seem here. I will say, though, there are these moments of deviation where they feel a bit like a term I'd like to coin. My Kingdom Hearts fans will know where I'm going with this. I call it the Nomura moment. So I say that in jest. I say that with love. I really do think Tetsuya Nomura is fantastic. But when you look at the state of Kingdom Hearts and the inclusion of so many spin-offs and mobile games packed into this story where even some core fans like myself get a little confused at where we're going with all of this. Yeah, when I saw a strictly mobile character appear in Rebirth, and they seem to have a relatively important piece of this plot in their hands. I was a little bit confused going, wait, like I had to look them up. What's going on? Who is this? I don't remember this character from Remake. I don't remember this character from the classic. What is going on here? And I can't say definitively how off the rails that gets, but I figured some sort of word of warning that, yeah, things like Ever Crisis may play a bigger factor than you anticipate. Again, this may play into me going on media blackout. This may have been already talked about, but I stayed away from that stuff. I went in thinking I only need to know Final Fantasy VII and Remake, but there are some other things that it would help for you to be familiar with. Now, with that said, the brightest spot of this game is absolutely the performances, which are literally perfect. And I don't say that lightly. No one is cast poorly here. Every line is delivered flawlessly. Every personality is captured beautifully. This game's cast of characters rocks, and it totally understands why people love each of these characters throughout the party. Whether it be the motion capture, which sometimes just comes down to the physical interactions between this party, like a hand on the shoulder, or the way they kind of stare off into the distance and you can tell they're lost in thought, or that moment of confusion and hesitation. It's captured so well. These characters feel entirely real, but at the same time, it's the way the group communicates with one another. There's a brand of familiarity here, not just with you as a player, like you know these characters well enough, but now we're past Remake, we're into Rebirth, and you can see how well they know each other. Even new inductions into the group, like of course Yuffie, you get to see how well they all gel together, which is one of the bright spots of the story, and how they bring Yuffie from this side character you can find in the woods and recruit as an option to someone who is actually a big piece of this story, and her interjection into all of that, I think, is one of the bright spots. There's one moment, of course I can't talk about it, can't show it, but it involves Yuffie, and it is hilarious. This game is authentically so funny. The way like Cloud is so cold and detached, while Aerith is so wholesome and adorable, and then Tifa's very grounded, very serious and thoughtful, and then Barrett's super out there. Like each of these characters have these moments where the way they all interact, it's continuously so funny. It will always put a smile on your face. There's also callbacks, naturally, and they're deep cut callbacks, like to the hand massage scene for Cloud. Like there's stuff like that where that brand of familiarity is just echoed throughout the entire script, and it's fantastic. But there's also familiar faces like Sephiroth that I feel are brought to new heights. Like we already knew he had this twisted descent into madness thanks to Crisis Core, but really here you get to see the evil side of Sephiroth, and the way he haunts Cloud, I think it's just phenomenal, and there's so many question marks surrounding him even that I think what they did with Sephiroth as a villain has been beautiful thus far. However, much like Final Fantasy VII Remake, I haven't found the game perfectly paced. For an open world game, it's paced remarkably well, but as a main story, if you're looking at it beat for beat, things like Chapter 3, which I can't show, are moments where I feel like they kind of just made this longer, padded out dungeon that forcibly splits up the party just to add some hours to the clock, add some gameplay to your loop. It reminds me a bit of some of the early chapters in Remake, like especially I think it was Chapter 4 or 5. Like you just kind of go through this long dungeon and you start to lose the plot of why you're even there because you spend so much time in there. I feel sometimes Rebirth and even Remake are just guilty of falling in love a little too much with the gameplay and losing touch with those story moments, which I think they could have a better balance with. Boss fights are still massive. I can't wrap my head around the scale of them, but one thing I did want to address was side quests. Side quests in this game, if you've tracked my Final Fantasy coverage, you know how I feel about these Final Fantasy side quests. Like 15, nope. 16, I know some people say the Act 3 side quests are great, but nope, that game wasted my time a colossal amount. And then 7 Remake, absolutely not. Like I have never recommended to anyone do Final Fantasy side quests. These side quests are really good because they drive into more character interactions, and because I love this party so much, the reward is there. But also, you're not just doing stupid fetch quests. You're like unlocking new shops, you're unlocking new mechanics, new ways to fast travel, you're unlocking new cards for the Queen's Blood minigame we'll talk about. Like there's new things you're always getting, and so therefore it is very rewarding to keep doing these. So I've done all the side quests in this game thus far, which I have never done for Final Fantasy unless it was 15 for the platinum and I had to do a bunch of side stuff for that, but otherwise absolutely I think the Rebirth side quests are worth it. That's enough about the story though. Let's talk about gameplay. This game does not rest on its laurels at all. Like, the skeleton you know and love in the combat for Remake is still here. So you still have your ATB gauge that builds up, and you'll use the commands to activate abilities. When one runs out, you're going to swap to another playable character, while the square button's a basic attack, triangles like this modifier or a stronger attack. Your limit gauge is still here, summons are still here, materia gradually upgrades into stronger spells, and really unique builds are made out of that. You get weapon abilities that are unlocked that give you new passives. You have weapons with unique skills that as you use them more, you unlock more. Like, yes, there are tons of things that are familiar here, because if it's not broken, don't fix it. Final Fantasy VII Remake to me is the best action combat system that we have got probably since, I'd say, Free Flow with Arkham. Like, I think it's that good personally. So I'm glad to see a lot of the skeleton is retained here, and what they've done is really refined it a ton, to the point that, another Kingdom Hearts comparison here, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's combat reminds me a metric ton of Kingdom Hearts 2 combat. What I mean by that is little things like the mobility. For example, in Remake, I really preferred to play as Tifa because of that additional mobility. Like, I thought Cloud was a little too rooted. I didn't like playing as Barrett. You know, Aerith was good to swap to for a weakness target with a spell, but, you know, I thought Tifa was just the star of the show. She was all over the place, and now every character plays like Tifa up to 100. When I say that it reminds me of Kingdom Hearts 2, it's the aerial focus, it's the command inputs, it's the fluidity, it's the constant dodge rolling, the perfectly timed blocks that can be equally punished by enemies, the SP system that gives you new skills to use, even non-combat things like an item transmuter, which you can put materials that you've collected from the open world into and gradually level up to increase what you can craft, reminded me so much of Kingdom Hearts 2's Moogle recipe. This feels like Final Fantasy VII Remake's Kingdom Hearts 2 moment. The way you're just zipping and zagging all over the battlefield, flying up into the air, like, it feels so good to play that. The story could be awful, and this game is still incredible because of how great it plays. And that's why, even though the open world activities are a bit familiar, because of A, the new gimmicks that they continue to introduce, and B, how great the systems are, I'm happy to engage with those very familiar objectives. As I've said in many an open world review before, it's about what you're doing to interact with these familiar systems. It's really hard to make an open world nowadays for many developers without your Ubisoft towers. And Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has your Ubisoft towers. Yep, climb up this big tower, flip a switch, here are some icons on your map, track them down, here's your objectives, clear out the area, do that again, right? But because the combat's so good, something like Combat Trials, I look forward to. Other things like opening all the treasure chests in one area. I want all the materia I can get. I like doing build crafts in this game. Great, sounds good to me. Because those systems are so strong, the things you engage with that are pretty basic open world fodder are fun. There are unique ones like Moogle gathering, chocobo tracking. Like, these are hilariously fun mini games that you'll find throughout. There's also lore gathering and so much more that you'll find, but there's a lot of different objectives there, and even ones I can't tell you about that you'll see and you'll unlock that give every single area its own bit of flavor, and it's fantastic. It's just that these core systems are really what drive it forward. Like, you're gonna want to engage with side quests and these open world activities because the core gameplay is so good. This is your way of just getting more of that. And the hour clock can absolutely run up. While the first, say, 7 chapters or so can fly by in like 20 hours, then those next few chapters really stretch out, where you can push into like the 40-hour territory by, say, chapter 9. So it really starts to get bigger and bigger. The game grows and grows, and that's a compliment to the game's gameplay pacing, right? There's a difference between the story pacing, which I have some critiques of, versus the gameplay pacing, where, for example, the open world is laid out wonderfully, where I bang out a lot of the side content because it's always on the way to the next main objective. It works a lot like an MMO in that way, a lot how I expected Final Fantasy 16 to work. There are moments that it can be a little gimmicky, like there's this stealth section in the early parts of the game in Calm, where, yeah, it just doesn't, it feels super limited. It's like, why did we even do this? Make this a cutscene, please, and we'll just be on with it, right? And you can trim some fat off the game. So there are moments there that I think the game gets a little overly gimmicked, but it's not just the open world activities that make Final Fantasy VII Rebirth this joy to play. It's the people that inhabit the world that really help define it. Walking through a location like Calm and hearing On Our Way, this new remix of it playing, this sense of beauty and this desire to stay in this world, it's so prevalent in times like these. The towns are packed with people and life and things to interact with. So it's not just like you're window shopping here. You get to talk with people. You get to find new quests. You get to do all sorts of mini games. Like the world feels very alive, but it's also broken up into segments, so it's digestible. If you're someone who's tired of one singular massive open world, what Rebirth does is it gives you a digestible amount in a section before naturally the story is going to force you onward. So the story doesn't lose too much pacing. It's just like those trip ups I mentioned, like chapter 3, where okay, chapters 1 and 2 I did. I'm going to do all the open world content, and then I'm going to get into more story. Oh, it's another long dungeon. I just did a bunch of those. You don't encounter that often, but the game's open world sections are small and digestible enough that you can 100% them and move along and not add too many hours to your clock until the game really starts to grow. And then you got some decisions to make on how much free time you really have. As for new combat things here, Yuffie, of course, is playable as she was introduced into Intergrade, but a lot of the dodging that's been put into this game, I think, was built off of what was brought in with Yuffie. You saw some synergy abilities introduced with Intergrade. This has been expanded upon, so all of the party is just cross-contaminating. So you have abilities that can cross from Cloud and Red 13 to Tifa and Barret. Like, there's just so many different abilities that you can use here, and they are all presented in such a sick manner. They are so fun to pull off. Not only that, but you get synergy skills. So there are ones like, hey, I'm Aerith and I need Cloud to support me, so he's going to stand by me and help protect me. You can use a combat shield. Like, there's just so many options available to you throughout combat. It's absolutely incredible. And then the soundtrack is egregiously good. There are just moments in side quests, that's why they're also worth it, that they treat you to this brand new piece of music. It's like, what? Who cooked here? Like, I know they had a great framework with Final Fantasy VII, but holy smokes, just some of the new tracks are so good. You'll have to hear them for yourself. Last thing I want to talk about was Queen's Blood, this optional card game that's in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. A lot of people remember Gwent as this defining moment of, hey, card games can be great in these bigger RPGs. I found that to be introduced with Pazak and KOTOR. I think a lot of people forget how great that was, but I digress. You all enjoy your Witcher 3, okay? Anyway, feels like the 7 Rebirth team took a look at that and the zeitgeist around and said, hey, let's go for a similar feeling, and I think they nailed it. It's overly tutorialized in the beginning, but as you just play, you understand it more. I think a lot of the extra information is welcome, but it's not until you play and interact with the systems that I felt I truly got it. In fact, the tutorial kind of pushed me away from it because I was like, I'm just more interested in all this other open world stuff. I don't need a card game that I barely understand. Basically 3 rows of cards, they all have points. Whoever has the most points wins. There's cool strategies you can deploy that even if you lose 2 out of the 3 rows, you can win through all the points you've amassed in a single row. So like, there's just layers to it. I'm probably speaking a different language, but what I will say is don't do what I did initially and sleep on this one. Take the time, play around with it, enjoy it, collect all the cards in the open world. Like, it's really worth it. Once I got 5-6 games in a row under my belt, I was like, where'd the time go? This is incredible. It's snappy, it's fluid, it's fast. It doesn't chomp up all of the open world time. Like, it works really quickly. They even have twists on it where they introduce puzzles for it. Like, it's awesome. It's an awesome, awesome, awesome mini game. One of my favorites introduced probably since Pazak, which it plays very similarly to, might I add. But nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I can really say about 7 Rebirth, naturally because I'm limited by certain embargo details, but also that's all I can really say because I've only put a certain amount of time into it. So I leave it to you. Are you going to be picking this one up? Let me know down below. I think it's fantastic. I think it's worth your time. And with that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next Retro Rebound.